because you are in a tumultuous time in your world. Yes, it is. And self-preservation, which is an extraordinary part of the human, has been labeled as a fear. What we want to offer to you is that self-preservation is actually an extraordinary part of your existence. It's saying, hey, you need to value of your physical body, of your emotional body, of your dreams, of your loving, of your laughter, of your depthfulness, of your whatever it is. Just value your value. And when you decide to open up your companionship with this beautiful part of you that's pulsing all the time, when you partner with it, it's always going to help you follow your heart.
Welcome to my podcast, Guy here. Today I welcome the beautiful Jacque Nelson, and she channels what she calls the Mary's group. Very fascinating conversation today. She actually spontaneously channels about 2/3 of the way through in this podcast. I don't necessarily invite channelers onto channel, but I'm more interested in the information they have learned and how we can mine out wisdom and actually apply it in our own lives. When she does channel, we certainly go into the topic of the disruption on the planet at the moment and what we can do about it within ourselves to show up differently. And I truly believe the more we heal ourselves, the more we will in turn heal the planet. Beautiful conversation, and I have no doubt you will get a lot out of it today. The year is flying by so fast. If you want to jump in and find out what we're up to with our retreats, our events, our online mentoring, there'll be all links below. We even offer free meditation as well, which is a great place to start, which sets you up for a 7-day challenge, which is all below as well. Let me know where you're watching this from in the world. I always love connecting with you guys as the YouTube channel continues to grow. And yeah, hit a subscribe, share it, anything that helps to continue to support my channel. Much love from me. Enjoy this conversation with Jacque. It's awesome. Jacque, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really, really actually very happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. I get excited. There's always, every time I do a new podcast, there's always like that little bit of anticipation to think, oh, where's this going to go today? Yeah, and I really try and allow that organic conversation to happen at the same time, for sure. So, which kicks me off, and I'm always curious, especially when I get people like yourself on, if you were at an intimate dinner party and somebody asked you what you did for a living, how would you respond to that right now?
Wow. It's funny because it changes over the years, right? Because I'm a channel, that's not always a well-received response. But what I do share with people is that I help people climb inside of themselves and learn who they actually are and what they desire and how actually limitless they are, and bringing that out and living the life that they really could participate in and enjoy. So I just tell people that it's funny, I used to design clothing for a while, and one day I thought, you know what, I have two jobs. I have this job where I do this channeling and really move through all of the layers of people, and I have this job where I create clothing and help people feel great and dress themselves in a way that matches them and speaks about them on the outside. And I said, in both jobs I see people naked. And because you're going, people's willingness to open into the vulnerability of themselves, because the hunger, Mary's often will say, you're not starving, you're powerfully hungry. And there's a big difference. Starving that can't be met. You don't know if you can ever feed that. But if you realize you're powerfully hungry, you're willing to reach into all the layers of yourself and the world to see what nectar will actually feed you.
I like it.
Yeah.
But how do we get to the point as humans, as a species, or whatever, that we become powerfully hungry? Because I feel that until that fire is lit at some level, where there's that willingness to go there and actually climb inside yourself, which I love the phrase. How do we get there?
Well, sometimes I think through some challenges, right? Like, life's got to be better than this, or something. There has to be something more. Um, I yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like I'm losing all my words here, but I believe that so often we go along like this is just what it is, but inside we know there's something more. I remember a long while ago when I was, working a regular job and coming home and raising children. I thought I loved my family, I loved my life, great friends, but I thought there's got to be something more to life itself, than this routine of working and then coming home. And that's when I guess I started to say, then what is it? And I think that the way you get to it is one, maybe be willing to know you might have an ache, but to realize the ache isn't threatening, it's a desire. And if you want, if you're looking around like what will satisfy my appetite, you can start to recognize what can meet this desire. If you do it from a painful place, it's a bit more difficult to get there because you just don't have your vessels open for noticing or recognizing things or bringing yourself with you. And if you realize, well, I'm willing to know that there's something and I'm excited about learning what it is. And like the Marys always say, be very curious because curiosity, without curiosity, nothing would exist. So if I can be curious enough to know, not just stuff that ache or put away, but actually value it and say, okay, what am I looking for? What am I noticing? How am I opening up to the world that does feel good? And how can I lean into more of that? I think it's really just deciding you want something more than you have right now and believing it's possible to get it, even and maybe especially when you have no idea what it is.
Yeah, definitely believing it's possible, isn't it?
Hmm.
And this exists because it
Yeah.
feels so foreign. I know it did to me anyway. Before I
Hmm.
actually started to have direct experiences along the
Yeah.
way. So, what was your journey then, Jackie? Like, how long have you been
Hmm.
channeling for? And before you were channeling, were you aware of this kind of
This
possibility?
kind of world.
Mm.
Well, I'm happy to share the story. It's kind of funny when I sat down, and of course, my image comes up on the screen, and I thought, wow, I've been doing this so long that I've raised children and gotten gray hair. So it started in 2020, so it's been 24 years. Um, and we had, I got married. One of our first experiences after we got married was I met, I went to somebody who was speaking. It was just somebody locally who was speaking, and I wish I could recall the name. We called him Mackie. I don't know his whole name. He was an elder from New Zealand and a very extraordinary, connected, like just if you've ever been in presence with him, it's in you. You can't, it just doesn't go away. Um, and we went to see him, and it really opened us up into thinking, what else do we want to do? There's a whole world that we haven't discovered. And my husband and I were thinking, well, we want to do something different with our lives. He was a printer, I was a human resource director. And we thought, okay, this is the come home, go to work, come home, sit. And so we were thinking something really off the wall, like, have an Airbnb or own a campground or something. But then I went to see somebody else, Robert Dubiel, and he suggested that Don and I sit down together to meditate just for like 5 minutes, which was brilliant on his part because my husband's been meditating since he was like 12, 11 or 12, and I can't sit still very long to meditate. So and the Marys started coming through. Prior to that, I suppose I would back up. We started learning Reiki. We heard about Reiki. We learned how to do it. We actually became Reiki master teachers, which is a way to move energy. Again, it's working in a way in the world that isn't normal, isn't seen all the time. We could feel the visceralness of it, the shift of it, connecting into energy. And then a friend of ours gave us a whole box of Abraham Hicks tapes. And this was back when they were the reel to reel tapes, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with Abraham Hicks.
Yeah.
I think they started a revolution. But we listened to him, and it just started opening us into a whole world that we felt the truth of. And we read Neil Donald Walsh's books and that sort of thing. And then now we get to the point where I went to see Robert Dubiel. We sat down to do the meditation, and right away, the first time we sat, my face started like contorting and moving around a bit on its own. I thought that was a little odd. Thought maybe that's what happens when you go into a really concentrated meditation. The second time, there was just a lot of energy just like flowing through my body. And interestingly enough, like the word kinesiology, like I kept feeling like kinesiology. I thought, okay, what's that about? I've later learned that it was that they were learning the Marys coming through were learning like how to connect with my body, use a physical body again, move with it, and move energy. So, and then the third time they popped all the way through and just started talking, and my husband started answering questions, and it seems people go, was that weird? It's like it seemed like the most normal thing in the world. Like suddenly there was this energy coming through me and in complete like casual conversation and
Oh,
just answering any question he had, making observations, talking to us about what love actually is and what the value of being human is. And they, the Marys, it's interesting. Sometimes when you're with them, they'll move into human touch, and they just there's this exquisite joy and grace that comes through with just that opportunity to have touch. And so from there, we asked if they would be, or my husband did, will you be back? And they said, anytime you ask. And so we would sit and we would call on them to come through, and it just took off from there. So
wow. At that point in your life, did it frighten you when something like that came in? Because,
yeah.
yeah, I remember experiencing it for the first time, and I bloody jumped a mile.
What was your first experience? I'm curious. What did it feel like for you?
So going into meditation, once I start to tune in and feel my field around me, it
Hmm.
always feels like a warm cloak coming in.
Yeah.
And quite often
Yeah.
there's a lot of energy above my head in the eighth
Okay.
center.
Hmm.
And and then there seems to be a connection comes through. And because I hold space a lot now,
Yeah.
it comes
Hmm.
through the voice box as well, which is it's quite until you experience it, it's hard to put into words. But the first time, because I remember even just sitting in meditation after I had my initial awakening, my arms would just start wanting to move naturally,
Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah.
why is it doing that? That is so weird. And my Welsh head would keep getting in the way and doubting it, as opposed to
Yes.
letting it flow and the creativity and it guide you to wherever it wants to go with it. And those
Yeah.
initial early signs, I would get up and I'd talk to my wife. I was like, this is just weird. What's going on? She's just like, go with it. Stop worrying about
Yeah.
it so much.
We need our encouragers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In our spouses or others around us. I love feeling how relatable that is to me, because I feel them come in through here, and Mary calls it about the door in the back of your heart. And I just, this whole area of the back of me just buzzes and lights up. And um, actually, in that time when they came through on the third time, all the way through, I also was like resistive, which is interesting. I was completely open and available, and I wasn't afraid. I knew something was occurring. It didn't make me feel weird. I thought it was fascinating. Um, but they wanted to sit up. I was laying down, and they said, sit up. And I said, if you want to sit up, then you sit up. I was kind of just like right on them with it, because for me it was like, I had to keep, like, you keep checking in. What is this? What's going on? Is it real?
Totally.
And so I'm like, well, then you do it. And they did. I was laying down, they set me up with a snap like that, was just like this. And it was like, oh,
Wow.
okay. And then, the movement of my arms, and they're really so fascinated with our bodies. And yeah, so very relatable experience in that way. Hmm.
And one last question on that. Are
Hmm.
you, when
Hmm.
they come in, are you aware, or were you aware initially and now you just kind of separate? Like, what happens to your consciousness while that process
Yeah.
is happening?
So I was aware they were coming in. I mean, I was having kind of, talking with them a little bit as they were doing it. And then Don, of course, picked it. And that's the other piece. He wasn't experiencing it, and it didn't seem odd to him. He immediately was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to ask questions. So, because he is just edgelessly curious, right? And so, uh, keep losing my train of thought. So in the, can you ask again?
So what happens to your consciousness when they
My
come
consciousness. Okay,
in?
thank you.
Yeah.
They're kind of like buzzing around here, so I'm like flowing in and out a little bit. Um, I feel like because I think that part of my agreement what is that I'm happy to be a vessel for this, like extraordinarily happy. And I release. So I feel when they're coming in, I release. And people say, where are you at? You know, where are you at when it's going on? Because I can hear it, I can notice it. I'm not noticing so much from the physicality standpoint as from a vibrational field. And I said, I think I go where I'll be when I'm dead. I'm not quite sure, but it's a brilliant place. Just it's so hard to describe. And I know people are really curious, and I would love to have a way to give it. And I'm an artist, so I've even tried to paint
Mm,
it. It just hasn't come through yet. Of it's such a differing experience. Um, but I'm in like I'm like all around me, but I'm not all around me on the planet. I'm all around me in what I am as a whole being, I think,
wow.
if that helps.
One thing during my journey of this process is it just continues to journey and evolve. But one of my
Yes.
fears that I kept coming up against, which was interesting, was that when you go into that expansion, it was like it was
Mm-hmm.
breaking down a belief system that I am not my body. So
Oh.
even though we intellectualize that, yes, that we can be the universe and stardust and with
Mm-hmm.
light in a physical vessel, and we can understand that. But when we experience that, it
Yeah.
was actually quite, there was a fundamental fear there for me. So every time
Ah,
it would vibrate and expand out. I
that's
didn't know what to
interesting.
do with it. Yeah, so I would stop it and come back, and it took me months, if not years,
Ah.
really. Just that there was a dance in slowly having to heal something in there that was to transmute that fear
Mm.
into a
You
space
know,
of safety.
like now I can just like right there, I can pop it out. For in the beginning, I would sit, my eyes would be closed, I would still myself into a particular way, and it would take a little bit to because the first time they just came through, but then of course my personality got in there, or just like, well, what's going on, more of those questions instead of just the natural way. So maybe that was fear, and just looking at and the Marys would actually say, okay, get on the train, we're going to send you off on a train, you're good, we got you.
Wow.
um and so that I could find a way to leave until I could just know I can just let go and release. I feel so completely held by them, and I'm not afraid. I'm never People have asked couple of things. Are you ever afraid you won't come back? Or are would have you ever not wanted to come back? And I'm like, I always, and maybe that's part of why I do it, is I very much love being in a life. I very much
Mm.
enjoy it. It's not always easy, but it's fascinating, and that sort of thing. So I'm always going to return. I don't have a fear of not being able to return. I'm still connected to myself. I'm just releasing and allowing them to utilize me as a vessel for sharing their message. And I figured that's the way I can do it, that it's the most pure connection and message coming through, is I just take myself out.
Yeah,
So,
beautiful.
yeah.
I remember, I think it was Tom. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tom Campbell, but I was listening to him a long time ago, maybe
Hmm.
when this was happening, at least 10 years ago. But once I developed the relationships, I kind of put it in my head that my higher self was wanting to show me something. And there was an
Okay.
opportunity to overcome a part of myself, to heal and grow, to
Mhm.
continue on my path forward. So once I was able to relate those experiences into something tangible in daily life, it's like, well, if I can start to overcome this, because I really wanted to lean into helping other people on the path,
Yes.
but I know if I don't overcome my own fears with this, then
Right.
what kind of facilitator am I going to be if I'm
Right.
not
Yeah.
fully embracing
Yeah.
it? So I started to then develop that relationship, and that really helped. And then in daily life, those areas where those fears come up in all sorts of things, and
Hmm.
it helped it in such a deep powerful way. It really gave me the courage to move forward in the direction I wanted to go, and let go of my identity and selling the company and all
Mm-hmm.
those things
Mm-hmm.
that you
Mm-hmm.
tell yourself you're not entwined in, but you really are.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. And that's Mary's sometimes referred to it as, um, withdrawing your participation from kind of like the tangle or the pulling that strand that sets you free from the confined thoughtfulness about yourself to a much more expansive availability that's part of everything. And yeah, so when we're moving through our own stuff, and it was interesting for me, it took a while to figure out how to move with Mary's on my own behalf. Could certainly move through others, and I would ask my husband, ask them questions, and of course they just started answering them before it would even get asked because they knew what I needed. And they have this amazing ability to kind of look in when they're working with somebody. They're actually following vibration. They're listening to the words, but they're noting more of like what is actually occurring, what's the story in the being, and where they're so great. Like they'll see somebody might be talking about something, they'll know that there's a tightness in that, even though the words didn't match it, and an opening here, and then they'll start to just talk with them about that, and people will start to realize. So they really help you to hear your own voice, and to, they always say we don't have a big bag of magic answers out here. We come into you because your answers are right there inside of you. Sometimes you just don't know how to get to them, or how to embrace them, or how to source yourself for them. So they help people to do that. And it's fascinating to kind of watch that. And then with myself, I'm very clear, like when I'm tightening or gripping, or when that fear might be coming through. And sometimes I'm pretty good at immediately saying, okay, I'm going to breathe out into the whole of myself, because I'm not limited to just this, part of me that grew up in a world full of separation, right? I'm so much a part of, the oneness. I want to make a note. It's kind of funny when you talk about my higher self. Mary's will talk about that. Like, we so completely get what you mean by that. And it is. It's like when you can connect in with that more spacious space of self. But they'll always say, we invite you to refer to the whole of yourself, because when you say my higher self,
Ah,
there's a part of you that says, gets offended. Like, is there a lower part of me that I have to deal with? And it says, like, you're a whole of self, and it's this pulsing sphere of union, right? And even our messy moments are brilliant. And so if we know that, we can interact our messiness with our higher self, it isn't like a separateness, it's all together, then everything can stand side by side and contribute to each other, take us through things much faster.
yeah, beautiful. The whole of it. I love it. Yeah, I've
Mm-hmm.
never really
Yeah.
known what else
Yeah.
to call it, but no, that's it's just
Yeah.
kind of picking out terminology along the way. But no, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's
Yeah. Great.
interesting picking up on what you shared there as well, because I really feel as I lean into this more and more, the self awareness just continues to grow. And you spoke about the words we speak, because words can be meaningless
Mm-hmm.
if they come easy. I mean, we can all talk. We got the words in our heads,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then, but this the state of being, that essence, that vibration, that expansion or contraction, that is
Yeah.
almost sitting behind it all,
Yeah.
as we kind of vocalizing those into form, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, that state of being. And we're so disconnected from ourselves as a society. Generally, we're in
Yeah.
our heads, we're not aware of our body, the
Mm-hmm.
sensations, the
Mm-hmm.
subtleties that are
Mm-hmm.
within that. And
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
it's hard work, isn't it, sometimes, though, it's like the chop wood, carry water. It's like go
Yes.
back within, go back within, and you're like,
Yes.
how
Yes.
much of this
It
can I
can.
take?
Right. And wait a minute, there's more I have to move through, or know, or realize. But when you do those, start tapping into, wait a minute, there's just a whole different way to arrive with ourselves. Like there is this space. The Marys sometimes will translate, because they talk a lot about the difference between union vibration, which is our original vibrational existence, and then separation, which has really got a lot of division, and it's where inhumanity comes from, all of those practices and separation and such. And yet they they'll move with, like, we think of a word like the word want. So they'll look at like the word want, and then they'll look into the vibration of it. And some, not on all of them, but then some they'll go, for instance, like want in its original vibration is actually the energy of open. And so sometimes we have an ache and a want. We believe, if I want something, I'm reinforcing that I don't have it. If you remember, oh, I want something, I open that, right? Like I open that vibration. I open that connection or that occurrence or that thing that feels like it's calling me. And so they also talk about don't want being, they refer to it as the threat field. That they said anytime you say don't want, depending on it, if it's something simple that you don't want, like I don't want to trip over that block, to I don't want my life to fall apart, it opens up threat and threat energy. And so, because threat's not actually an original part of who we are. And and it'll open it up and it kind of destabilizes us. And if you're in I don't want, then you start to feel a little heavier or a little less possible or a little fearful. And then they always talk about the characters of blaming and excuses and justification and defensiveness shows up in that field because you're trying to figure out how to survive it, right? And they say, just so when you feel I don't want, or you say I don't want, just take a breath and say, what do I want? And you kind of bring it over into your center, into your actual essence. And then you translate that want to what do I open? And they also say, and we can give you a two bridge if you don't feel like that's, like I open feeling great every day, right? Or I open, leaning into my desires or creating a sense of peace within me. And if you say I open that, but you don't believe yourself, then they say put that little bridge of two, and like I do. The truth is I do open to it. I'm just not quite there yet, or I don't know how the landing will happen, but you can still open it. So when you say I want, and you translate it to I open, it really shifts your ability of how you create and how you understand yourself as a creator. And that's an open space. That center, that essence space is connected into everything, and it's possible, and it can start moving. You'll start noticing things that align with it. But in the don't want, you just get all kind of swallowed up. So they just always encourage us, let your don't want, don't be afraid of a don't want, just let it remind you to ask yourself what you do want and then go with that.
Yeah, because we end up getting fixated on all the things that
Yeah,
we don't want, right?
we
And
do.
and
We
it
do.
keep perpetuating
Yep.
the life circumstances, and it gets
Yep.
thrown in our face.
Yeah.
And
And then we
yeah,
don't know how to get out of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Question I had for you, right? You mentioned something right at the start. When you started channeling, the first thing they started to teach you was what love is, and that
Yeah.
really pricked my interest.
Yeah.
And why do you feel that's where they started? What is love?
Well, first it was such a sensation. It was an experience moving through me that I've and I fully love people. It opened something in me that remembered what an unrestricted love is. And people will ask me sometimes to get tired when you channel in, like I'm being washed with love the whole time. I come out, I can go in feeling tired and come out excited.
Wow.
Um, but one of the things the Marys will talk about is, that love is real and it can't be proven. So we kind of confine love into, well, actually, what we don't want or what we fear of losing or what we want proven to make sure it's there. They talk a lot about relieving fear. And it's our most natural state. And I still remember we were in front of a audience one evening, and the Marys actually said, love is real and can't be proven. And a woman kind of objected, which they always invite a good argument. And she kind of said, well, I love my kids and I can prove it. And they said, you can do things to show your love, but your love doesn't need to be proven. Your kids know it's there. You could try to prove it, and it will actually take you farther away from it, because it'll get more fear up in it. And if you ever ask somebody to prove they love you, you got to start over because you just depleted the purity of love. And so it's waking into remembering that it's the most natural and pure state of our existence. And some of us have never like really gotten what that means. And yet meditation can be very helpful to just call forth the vibration of love, because it wants to have a relationship with us, and it will start to show us what it feels like, what it sounds like, and it shifts and changes, but it moves with our senses. Our bodies know how to understand it. Our minds also do. Marys love our minds. They say that there's two minds. There's the thinking, processing mind, which they always say, quit dissing it. It's an extraordinary library. It's capable of everything. And we have a being mind, and it's kind of that space that we talk about, that the channeling comes through. It's our connectedness into the all, and it knows it's that intersection or that blending of our physical and non-physical space that can source everything. And when we love is it's a truth. And it took me a long while to kind of walk through that. I was like, what do you mean, like it can't be proven, we just have to trust it? No, just have to let yourself remember that it's your natural state. And they talk a lot about let every response be love, let every step upon the earth be love. They just said, we think someone else said that, but we repeat it. They said, let let yourself just sit and realize that our true nature is like lift energy. We walk around a lot of times kind of weighted or heavy or trying to move through things. And if we open that lift energy, we just breathe ourselves up. And they talk a lot about the space of our sternum as our center of well-being. And it's the space between our wisdom, which is in our heart, and our expression, which is in our throat. And we remember our well-being. It's so available, the knowing of love, the knowing of well-being. And even when you're being challenged, like the best response is, I'm calling forth my well-being, because that will stabilize you into knowing how to move with whatever is occurring, whether it's a conversation internally or externally. So love is kind of indescribable, and yet it's deeply and wholly known when you feel
Yeah. Look, everything you just shared resonates completely with me. But
it.
I could say one of the challenges is that,
Hmm.
and especially for like a man growing up in the
Hmm.
valleys of Wales,
Yes.
love could almost be a sign of like weakness, not strength.
Okay.
And
Okay.
like showing emotions, showing vulnerability, that there was this kind of hard exterior shell. And one thing I feel passionate about is trying to actually bring more men into this work and actually
Yes.
feel into the wholeness, the masculine and the feminine
Yes.
parts of ourselves to create that whole being, you say, because it's so powerful. And
I
I was wondering
fully
if
agree.
you have any words to that, or even that men that might be listening to it, or all the wives that want their men to go, I get it, but he just doesn't get it.
He doesn't get it. I think one thing is you want to remember that it's interesting. The Marys talk about, the divine feminine and the divine masculine. That's actually all of it's in all of us. And yet it has been a masculine, that there's so much fracture in men in the world from being sequestered into kind of that, a little bit of, you have to be bold and you have to be strong and you have to be tough and those things. Um, for their wives, if you might say, to notice and pay attention to how they do know love or how they do feel love, and because it may be expressed differently, and to invite into that. Um, the Marys were talking with a group of people that were saying like how women have been so oppressed, and it is true, and yet they're like, your men have been equally oppressed. It's not an either or. It's just they've been oppressed, and they've been oppressed out of feeling the wholeness of who they actually are and being able to know love. How they, like the Marys are like, how inhumane is that for a male not to get to freely and openly walk through love? Like maybe women are encouraged to do that, or to show it, or to it's to wake into the Marys. May I just bring the Marys through for a minute, because I want to talk about.
Please.
Okay. Ha. Ha ha. We want to be in on this. Yes. Hello, hello, hello. So
Hello.
it ha. Ha. You are very yummy. That's like climb all up in your energy, yes? So, so it's, what the first thing we'd like to say is willing to release the tyranny, because what happens is tyranny gets in between people and getting to just have the simplicity of knowing love and experiencing it, expressing it, and being the just like, we see vulnerability. People think about vulnerability as this weakened or state that isn't so strong. Vulnerability is one of the most extraordinary, we're going to take these off, most extraordinary places you can be. It means everything of me is open. And when you really step in that vulnerability, you also know, and that vulnerability is mine, and it's curious, and it's not going to limit itself from what it can know and express and experience, and it's going to gather what it needs from any other part to be held well in that. The difficulty in your world is there's so much fearful loving going on, and it's so well intended. How, and we know you have beautiful young ones, yes, and you might want to love them, and yet if you fearfully love them, then you're going to, there's a bit of a held breath in that. When you love them without, when you love them boldly, when you love them, encouraging them to bring out who they are, when you love them with curiosity and conversation, and knowing they may not agree with you, or they may have differing ideas or ways of looking at things, when you love them knowing they have teachings and understandings and groundedness to bring to you also, and you want to take that in, and you want to offer out to them, you're going to love them in a way that, yes, will help them know how to move in your world in a way that keeps them well and supports them, and that they can have really good discernment about how they make their choices. And yet so often people fearfully love themselves, and when we see that, you close places off. So when you're asking about men being able to love, it's we'd say to fearfully, courageously love yourself, and to kind of find out, what does that even mean to me? Because it may be very different to the person next to you. There's no one uniform experience of loving. It's what's the truth of what's moving in me. And if I feel a compelling or a draw or a connection, and I feel as though this burst of kindness or strength or curiosity, or whatever it is I have to offer, because it's not just about being a male or a female, it's about being a being. And so it's knowing truly, to truly love in your world for either is courageous without fear. And so it's I have to, not I have to, like it's got burden in it. Have to. I can't repress myself out of actually knowing that I'm alive, and that I'm a life, and that I'm creating a life, and I'm in this life itself. And there's so much to know there. And so it may not be, oh, I'm going to love myself. We've talked with people about that, and we've seen people actually go through tyranny of, I don't know how to do that, so I don't get to have love in the world. We say, please don't do that to yourself, because you're already that. All you're doing is bringing your yes open in whatever pace and movement, perspective and desire you would like to kind of seep into it, or let it seep out, become friends with love, hang out with it for a little bit, get to know what it is. Is one of the things we heard Jackie share, that, we translate words from, what they are in their original vibration to how they're utilized in your world with separation in it. And acknowledgement is one of those words we use. So, and how does that come into this, you might wonder? Acknowledgement in its original form, in its original vibration, what it actually is. It isn't something where somebody decides that you can be acknowledged for something. It's to know something or someone as it knows itself, before any other idea of it got in the mix. And that includes yourself. And so when we move with people who are saying, I don't know how to find that, we invite them to step into that vibration. And truly, we often say, go do it with something in nature first, or something that, is awe-inspiring to you, to let yourself stand with it, because it's not a one-way exchange. It's to know that I'm opening myself to be seen and heard and acknowledged by the thing I'm acknowledging. So if it's a tree or nature or cloud or somebody you love, it's to allow that receiver to open, not for just what they want to offer, but to open to how do I know myself? Who is this being I am before any, and particularly lesser idea of me came into the mix? How can I breathe my own breath into that space of this essence that I am? And it doesn't mean I have to float through the world or live in a superfluous or kind of light way. It's This is the actual natural way of me. I'm just going to start releasing what I've tucked away out of fearfulness and get to know it a little bit for myself, and then see where I share it or what I can receive because I've opened this relationship with myself and my wholeness and the oneness. Yes? Does any of this make
Mm.
sense for you?
Totally. I'm just nodding away in agreement. And I guess while I've got you, the next
Yes.
question I
Yes.
feel is that the entire planet could do with a bit more of this, not just a man
Yes.
or a woman,
Yes.
because we're so governed by fear. It's so
Mm-hmm.
perpetuated in our
Mm-hmm.
daily existences. And
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like I don't know, the way we've set up the systems and the cultures want to keep
It
us in a
is.
box.
It is. It is.
But
We
yet,
agree.
but yet, which is creating the separation, which I know Jackie mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and we're
Mm-hmm.
moving towards a unity consciousness. Well, I like to think so anyway, where we don't see
Mm-hmm.
ourselves as separate as each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do we continue to do to embrace what's happening and what's coming?
Ah, okay. Because you are in a tumultuous time in your world. Yes, it is amped up.
Yes,
Yes,
I'm,
absolutely. We often offer to people that, the what is that? That infinity, that Mobius, yes.
yes, the
That
eight.
it
Yeah.
it yeah. So it's been moving. So if you look at it though, so union energy, and it's an actual wholeness of existence. And we talk about it as a pulsing sphere of creation. Yes. And it's what you actually each individually are and what you are as a wholeness together. Yes. Right now, and the Mobius is wonderful, that infinity, it's wonderful. And yet it does this. Yes. And right now it's interesting. We're watching, like, if you were to look at what humanity actually is and what humanity is within humanity in it, which has all come from practices and separation and all that fear. Yes. Fearful loving, false fear. And even in your world, if we might, can we elaborate a little bit? We
Please.
notice that self-preservation, which is an extraordinary part of the human, has been labeled as a fear. Yes. And so, oh, my self-preservation fear. What we want to offer to you is that self-preservation is actually an extraordinary part of your existence. It's a part of every one of you. And you know what it actually is? It's an insistence that it insists that you value your value. And so it's not afraid. Self-preservation is unafraid of anything. What it is it's saying, hey, you need to value your value of your physical body, of your emotional body, of your dreams, of your loving, of your laughter, of your depthfulness, of your whatever it is. Yes, value your value. And when you decide to open up in your companionship with this beautiful part of you that's pulsing all the time, that your self-preservation, when you partner with it, it's always going to help you. And we've heard you to say, follow your heart. Yes,
Mm.
because that helps you follow. There's a song that someone in your world has written that has a line in it that says, follow your direction magnetically. Yes. And we love that because that taps into in your world magnetically through the vibration and the truth of your heart and what you're drawn to follow that, not because else told you it's the thing to do. It's because it's a knowing and you have to do it. Yes. So let's get to the Mobius again. Right now in your world, we see that Mobius, you're all kind of in that tight little cross section of it. Yes. So if you take your hands, if you want to kind of start practicing relieving the impact of the crunch, then put your hands out here and feel them on each end of that Mobius. And you may feel it actually buzzing, right there between them. and then slightly, ever so slightly push in, and then turn one hand forward and one hand back, and then push it again, and it's going to pop into that sphere of union. And the reason we bring that to you is that that's the shift you're looking at occurring. Is it's not if this is the right side or the wrong side, or it's this against that. We would say to you, please stop practicing against energy. It never takes you where you want to go. But if you twist it and you pop it, then everything opens out into that sphere together as a oneness. Yes. And so, and then everything that actually can breathe, and that is of original creation, that is what you actually are as a being, the vibration of soul and the fluidness of source and the wonder of physical nature. It's so extraordinary. Please don't miss out on that. And so, and then that breath comes in. We heard you and go, yes, like I can breathe. It took it out of the division and popped it into the together, which is your natural state. And so how can you do that every day with the world that's moving? It's to, as often as possible, I'm going to remember, I'm going to kind of, have this little touchstone of center of well-being that Jackie also shared with you. I'm going to remember that there's a lift energy in there and that I am always well. And so when I remember that, it can dissipate the fear that has driven me. And we know, we can hear people saying, yeah, right, I'm always well, Mary, you don't have to live here or go through this or that. You're always well in the midst of whatever it is. And what we're encouraging is that you connect into that, so that then you can call to yourself everything that supports that wellness. Yes. And that can grow it, and that can help you feel it and help you open out into it. And so then it's not, I'm moving through the life trying to survive what I'm afraid of, because the truth is, we heard somebody often saying, well, they're the exception to the world. They're thriving in what they're doing because they're the exception. And we started looking, thriving is not the exception. It's actually the rule. And the confusion that fear has said, no, only a few get past what confines us. And we're saying, please retell yourself the true story, because thriving is the rule. And when you can say, I'm willing to open to that, yes, or I'm willing to just see if that's anywhere in where I can pull from or notice or remember, you're going to open a whole new realm of yourself that isn't concerned with how the world has been created around you. You're going to open the world within you and create how you interact with the world around you. And that is very helpful too. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. And one more question I have for you then, because
yes.
what I see, because I hold space for people every month to connect to their heart, essentially, get them out of their heads and connect to their hearts.
Yes.
And they say that is the shortest distance, but the longest journey for so many of us, which I know it has been for me along the way as well. But when we govern by fear, essentially, there's a difference between the have and the I have to have that. That's what Jackie mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And how do we get to that? How do we allow ourselves to get to that point where fear is crippled us, that I have to have that? I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to start actually connecting to myself, as simple as it seems.
Yes. So it starts in that kernel of, I want to feel better than I do right now. And it's like, I don't even know how far that will take me. If sometimes when you start, I need to get there, that journey can seem really arduous. Yes. I want to feel better than I do right now. I open to feeling better than I do right now, or feeling more aware, feeling more grounded, or feeling whatever it is, and invite your self-preservation, who's going to help you insist on insisting on your value. And insisting is a completely different thing than demanding. Demanding comes from fear. Insisting is love that is of loving. It's a way of moving with you that causes assuredness, a realness, a remembering that you're already whole. Yes. And so I'm going to take this breath, because I just have to, and I don't even know why, and I don't even know if I can get there, and I still have to do it. And I'm going to allow myself to have that. And so I open allowing this to just take one step. And that one step could be huge, or it could be just so incremental, and both are of equal value. They're extraordinary. So it's, what is it? One of the big pieces is, what do I want? Because if they're in that don't want field, there's going to be threat, which is pretty oppressive. Yes. And it's also very clever. It won't let you know that you're under threat. So it's like, oh, if I'm feeling a don't want, there's a dismay or a heaviness or a grip or something going on. I want to take a breath. And for just right now in this moment, because I've found my yes to your, the person will say, I'm here to experience this with you. And so I'm going to let my yes guide me. And truly, when you know that this space is your center of well-being, it's not a landmine. And you will be joined there by everything you need. In your internal world. It's an extraordinary world. And one of the things we talk with people about, if you don't mind, if we can go a little further with it.
Please.
This space of you, this is the home of you. This is the home of me. Yes. And you're doing all this, whether you just started or you're long into your path, or you've landed in wonderful, blissful things. This is the home of me. And as I choose, then anything that interacts in the home of me must be honoring, must be loving, must want to support and rise me up and join me there. So what you'll find, though, so we say that, imagine a doorway. No door. A door is not needed. That's fear-based. We know you have doors on your houses, and they're important because of the world you live in, yes? And yet, just imagine an open doorway coming into the home of you. And on one side of it is a welcome sign. And it's beautiful. And yes, we are going to say, it's saying anybody and everybody is welcome to my doorstep, to this opening to me. And they will come, yes? That welcome sign is also facing inward. So it's welcoming you to the home of you. Now here's the piece. On the other side of that doorway is a no trespass sign, and it is as brilliant. It's not a keep out sign. It's not afraid. It's saying, this is a no trespass, which is a very powerful decision energy. And it faces outward. So anyone who's come to your doorway, anything of them that is supportive and honoring and caring can come in. Anything that isn't, you can send down on the porch where there's lemonade and brownies for them. Yes, but you don't need to let them in. You don't need to take that in. You can care for them because you're somebody who cares for people. But it's also, you want to honor them by not allowing them to behave in a way that is harmful to another, you in this instance, because it's also harmful to themselves, and you're not willing to do that. And so it's a decision for anything of you that is showing up with loving. And that doesn't mean it can't be messy, because messy is sometimes how you walk through things. Just that it has to have regard. Union is all honoring and has all regard. And so separation, not much. Yes. And so it is. And that sign faces inward also. So anything of me that is condemning, that is, speaking to myself in ways that keep me afraid or that keep me burdened, all of these things, I'm also letting them know that every part of me, every aspect of me, every way of me, everything that moves, and I'm going through a process. Oh, that thought needs to go have lemonade brownies, and for a little while until it can clear and come into the home of me or rise in the home of me. Because when you are moving with yourself, we moved with people with, what is your true inner voice within? And one of the two things you can really know: one, your own true voice will never condemn you. A voice that's been in survival or taken things on will condemn you, and sometimes voices outside of you will condemn you. The other thing is that you'll know it's your own true voice because your own true voice listens. It's not just, oh, it's my voice and it's my way and this keeps me safe. It's willing to listen because it's unafraid. It won't let anything in that won't care for you, and yet it can care for them, for others. So it's coming into this place where you're going to breathe open enough to, I'm developing that space in me. I'm fine tuning it, or I'm just starting to realize that because you can right away ask yourself, and that self-preservation, if it's harmful to me, whether it's coming from me or someone else. I want to know how that feels, not so I can be afraid of it or control it or be against it, so I can choose. Because choosing is a powerful tool of creation. So when people come to you, they can take that breath and say, I'm choosing to follow my yes as far as I know how to go today, because I want to feel better than I did yesterday. And I might not even know why or how to get there. And I still have to do it. Yes?
Beautiful. As we all have a choice
Yeah.
in that
All the
moment.
over and over and over and over again. That's people will say, well, Mary, this thing, this thing happened, and I don't want to think I chose that. Yes. And we say it's never about the detail or the experience. It's about your response to it. Your choosing is everywhere in your response to anything that's occurring. And so when you really come in, how do I choose to move with this? And you remember your center of well-being. We also call it that your inner grin, the house of your inner grin, yes? So that the corners of your energy can lift up there and often put a little smirk on your face, yes? And yet it causes a widened breathfulness because you're there with you. And it will always assist you in going to where you want to go. And so that inner voice, if it's got condemning, you can say, hey, listen, I know I probably built you and I probably got a gold star for how well I did it. And yet, unless you're willing to transform into going where I'm going, which is into a space where I am freed of, or I feel the relief and I am freed of what feels so weighted and destructive for me and for this world. I can send this energy out also to anywhere else that is needed. And, until you can go with me there, then you can go lay in a hammock. Yes, because every voice, the whole voice within me and every inflection of it is for me. It's not against me. And that's something that I'm moving to, that I have a yes for, and I'm not shifting. I open that. Yes.
Yes. I
Beautiful.
before we bring
Yes.
Jackie back, is
Mm-hmm.
there
Mm-hmm.
anything you want to add to all our listeners today with everything we've covered on the show?
We would really like to encourage you to inhale and exhale. And some of it you may object to, some of it you may be curious about, some of it you may not even understand, some of it you may say, oh my gosh, I've known all this time. Inhale and exhale your own breath. You are the greatest being in your own experience. You are your primary relationship. You are your most extraordinary guide for who you are and what your life is and who you are as a life in your world. And so tune in, and we really talk about breathing your own breath, because when you first came into the world, that very first breath, it's a contrast to come from non-physical to physical. Yes. And not a lesser, we say, they're saying, welcome home to the physical also. Yes. You went, there's something there so juicy and wonderful for you to experience. But that very first breath was still all completely you. And then the next breath started to breathe in the environment around you. The environment around you has separation in it and some fearful loving. And also, so people might say, well, what other loving is there? There's love that is of loving, that is a pure state. That's source love. That's actually the love that you are. Tapping that open, breathing your own breath, realizing I'm not here to survive. I'm here to grow and learn and be an add and an answer and an ask and to discover and to contribute and to receive. And so whatever it is, take what's for you, let it be your nourishment, and let the rest just pass on by. And that's whether it's this conversation or anything you're experiencing. Look for what the morsels of gift are for you. Listen as a gift, not as a burden. Speak as a gift, not as a burden. Experience as a gift, not as a burden. And so, or as a task, in your world, tasks are so, put out there, like you have to complete this task to prove you have value. And it's like, well, what if I just do it as a gift? I'm gonna explore so much more and do so much more significance and wonder if it's a gift and I'm in this fluidness with life instead of just trying to get through it one task at a time. And so it's leaning in. So what we'd offer to you is know that you are amazing. And if you don't know it already, breathe your breath and ask it to take you into your knowing, because it's in there and it wants to come out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for
Indeed,
joining us,
indeed.
Marys. I
Oh,
really appreciate it.
it's been our honor. It's been our honor. Thank you for all you do in the world, our friend. It matters, and it's in good timing. Be well.
Thank you.
Mm. Hey.
Do you remember any of that? Like, are you observing it all, or you just
Like,
checked out and
yeah,
know?
I observe it. I can remember it right now. It's one of the fascinating things is like I can feel how all that felt from being with them as they're doing it. And then if I listen to it, it's like one time I came on and went, "Oh my gosh, did you hear what Mary said in that workshop last night?" Or, because I was listening to the replay, and Don goes, "Yeah, you were there." I'm like, "No, I wasn't there." The Jackie that's like not connected to, to all of my personality stuff was there, but my personality listening to it is going, "Holy cow, that's amazing." So it's two totally different experiences for me to hear it than for me to hear it when I'm out there, when they're in.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty
Well,
cool.
Jackie, that was a beautiful organic podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
went
Thank
in
you.
all directions. I had no idea where it was going to go, and it was wonderful to be on this side experiencing that with you. So thank you so
Terrific.
much for
Thank
everything. Where
you.
can people find out more about you,
Mm.
Jackie, if they want to? Where can we send
Um,
them?
you can go to our website, which is the Mary Group, and I always say Mary, because some people say Merry, which they are pretty merry, but themarygroup.com. You can learn all kinds of things about us. We also have a YouTube channel, the Mary Group, and on Facebook we have a group called A Soft, Warm, Wise, Humorous Place to Land. And the Marys post a note or a comment or an inspiration on there daily, and it's building a community for people to be able to connect with, and kind of being that hub of, okay, I'm going to lean in with other people who are learning how to love that is of loving. So that those are three ways. We have a couple books. You can find all of that stuff on our website. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
So
I thoroughly
thank
enjoyed
you.
today. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Truly appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you.